Thank you all for joining us here today on our diversity discussions in partnership with Hall of Flowers. As I speak with several people across the cannabis industry as we talk about their stories, diversity and inclusion, and what steps the industry can do to take so we could progress forward. Our first panelists are Kassia Graham of Cannaclusive and Maggie Connors of Besito for accountability into action. Please welcome our guests. Hey, how are you doing?
Hello.
Happy Monday.
Hi.
Thank you both for taking the time out to join us today.
Happy Martin Luther King Day.
Happy Martin Luther King Day, indeed. As we begin, I want to dive into a bit of your history and have you both talk about what led you both to want to enter the cannabis industry, with Kassia joining Cannaclusive and Maggie with the launch of Besito.
Kassia?
Oh, okay. Can I actually ask that we have a quick moment of silence for Dr. Martin Luther King? Is that possible?
Let's do it. Absolutely.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much for being amenable to that. I joined Cannaclusive because I really wanted to support the work that Mary Pryor was doing in the cannabis industry. Essentially, Cannaclusive was founded because of the lack of diversity that Mary, Tanya, and Charlize were seeing as they were venturing in the cannabis industry in the Los Angeles area. And we wanted to make sure that not only were we being represented as Black people, but that people of color as a whole like had a space and had a voice in cannabis. So I wanted to be able to support that any which way I could. I started with the team in, I want to say, late 2017 and have been with them since.
Okay. And Maggie?
I came from a slightly different perspective. I moved to California in 2014. And it was about 5 years ago now that I really dove into the industry. First, for a love of cannabis. Growing up on the East Coast wasn't as accessible. And of course, moving to California and the culture here was something completely different. And I'm professionally passionate about consumer products and insights and design and had come from that world. And moving here, I just was sort of fascinated by the nascent landscape. This was before we went rec, and the consumer and the aesthetic and bringing a new voice. But really what got me to come into it full-time professionally is the more that I learned about the racist history of prohibition and how that affected the laws. And then, of course, the extreme injustices of not only mass incarceration last few decades, but as we build a legal industry now, how are we making it equitable, and how are the leaders, shaping today's industry, which of course many leaders have come for decades before, but how are we shaping the current industry with values?
Absolutely. Can you both speak on a bit of your history and your introduction to the cannabis plant and your relationship with the plant today?
My history with cannabis goes back a very, very long way. And it wasn't up until like maybe 2 years ago, upon joining Cannaclusive, that I actually was a bit more forthcoming, because I first experienced cannabis use when I was 2. Not because my family was doing anything odd, but because my gynecology's a Rastafarian. And essentially I was quite sick, and he made a concoction that was like a combination of cannabis, a couple of different herbs and so on. And it helped to save my life. And so I've always had like this very high regard and respect for the plant, and understanding that it was made for us, and that it's a really fantastic tool to help people heal. And, of course, as a teenager, I experimented and throughout my 20s, but then around my like mid 30s, when I was diagnosed with cancer, I started using it more so as kind of complementary medicine to go with the opioids that I was prescribed, which, while they had more of an immediate effect, did not have a lasting effect. And so I focused on using cannabis to aid in that process with regards to pain management.
Yeah.
And for me, cannabis was never really introduced. It was more so, not discussed. I think given the stigma, and it was sort of a capital D drug in my East Coast upbringing, and therefore the way it was introduced was at kind of high school parties, and I learned to kind of follow my nose and find those people who were always my people. But ultimately, I didn't have agency over it. I didn't feel safe buying myself. I didn't really have safe access. And so it was kind of leaning on sometimes friends, sometimes strangers to participate. And of course, only moving to California, where I was able to have more knowledge and control and agency over my cannabis experience, knowing what I'm consuming, where it's from, when I want to consume. It really changed my relationship with the plant from kind of social and something I connected with my close friends and often siblings with, to something more intentional and personal and solo. And so now it's been sort of a tool of consciousness, expanded consciousness and healing and meditation, and a way to help me go within and relax more.
Last year, you both, in addition to a few other members, created the accountability list. Can you both speak on what brought about that creation and what is the goal of this project?
That was actually Cannaclusive, and it was really created by Mary and supported by the Cannaclusive team and several other really amazing people in the community. It was basically arise from us realizing that there was a lack of voices being raised with regards to what happened to Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. We were seeing that an industry that was built on the backs of Black and brown people was pretty silent, and decided to take note of the people who were standing up, and not just standing up and saying something, but actually into something that was tangible. So we created that list. Again, is a work in progress. We have some updates that will be coming out very soon, just to see, where people, and again, I have to preface it, but it's not a call out, it's a call in. We want to encourage people to, now that they know better because of the information that we and other people in the industry have provided, that they can do better. And so that means that they will, provide good representation, that they will actually take some of what it is that they have earned and funnel it back into those communities who basically made this industry possible.
What has been some of the response from the companies that you mentioned and from your audience with this accountability list?
Our audience absolutely loves it, because what we're finding is there are many people in the cannabis space who want to shop their values, and a great deal of their values means that they're supporting organizations that also support them and support the most marginalized. We have had some people, some brands who are not necessarily in love with the idea of the accountability list, but then there are others who came to us and said, how can we do better? How can we be better? And so we focus primarily on those folks who want to learn and do better, and to actually grow and to support people.
There's another project that you both are working on as well, the Cannabis for Black Lives. Can you speak on the creation for that and what's that agenda?
Do you want to go ahead and go first, Maggie?
No, you take it.
Okay. So Cannabis for Black Lives, we basically, after the creation of the accountability list, decided that, we wanted to actually put that into action. So one way was for us to get together a couple of people in cannabis, and initially started with Maggie Luke, Bianca, Monica, and a couple of other people. And, basically said, okay, you're making X amount of money per year in this industry. What can you do to give back? There are so many social equity organizations that are out there. People who like Supernova Women, like the Hood Incubator, now, which is out of Massachusetts, that are doing this work so that they can help bring people into the fold and into the industry who want to be there and deserve to be there, but are facing so many barriers. So based on the amount of money that they make, we have basically adjusted donation level, which are arranged that way, like everyone can be involved, because we don't want anyone, especially given what happened in 2020 and the fires and so on, we don't want anyone to feel left out if they want to help. So we take a portion of those funds and we divert them to these social equity organizations. And then on top of that, we also make sure that we amplify those organizations so people know what great work they're doing and encourage other people to aid in funding them. And we all are working on basically offering a couple of different, sorry, there's a bit of lag, I think, working to offer mentorships, and basically to make sure that they thrive in the industry. It's not enough to just get in there. You also have to make sure that you know how to market, that you know what the laws are, you are compliant, you know how to run your business, and you're going to be in that industry for the long run and not for a short term.
Okay. Let's dive into accountability and what that actually means, and where does accountability end, and then where does action begin, and what steps can brands do to direct this transition?
I can touch on that, especially as it relates to this coalition of company, Cannabis for Black Lives. So something I noticed was, for the most part, these groups were not in the same room, bifurcated. So a lot of big companies, often with the most money, a lot of power, and then nonprofits who have been around for years and years leading this equity work, often Black or brown led, and there was a disconnect. And so as Kassia mentioned, part of what we do with these companies, and by the way, all are welcome in, please reach out anytime. We are adamant that companies of any size join, because again, everyone should be in that room. And also, even if you're new to this work, it is still early in this industry. And as Kassia said, we like to call people in to join now and assist with them getting into the work and supporting the folks that we believe in. So we track people's progress. We track that they are showing up to monthly meetings. We track that they are making their scaled donations, that they are following up on their amplification, using their social or digital platforms to amplify these critical voices and the critical work. And then we also measure company makeup. So how diverse are your teams? And then we help with community pipelines, with support, with culture initiatives, as Kassia mentioned, to make sure that these companies are not just supporting the work, but looking internally and changing from inside to again, elevate those voices. So it's something that we track over time because obviously the accountability and making sure companies and individuals follow through is critical to supporting the work.
With the focus on today, with it being MLK and just focusing on our panel discussion of diversity and inclusion, what changes and programs would you both like to see throughout the industry, and how can they truly be effective? Maggie?
I can go.
One thing that I would really like to see is people. Oh.
You continue, Kassia.
Oh, okay. One thing. Okay, I think. Okay, one thing I'd like to see is a huge change in the way that people do things, because it would be really fantastic to see inclusion of people, not just at the floor level, like literally people who are on the retail floor, to those who are at the managerial director level, the boardrooms, to people who are running these companies. And I think that that's very necessary. But also seeing more people give back and to say that you're going to do something. I want to actually see people do it. And I think for some people, they are concerned about losing customers, but they're also failing to see that they'll be gaining customers, not just monetarily, but these are people who will appreciate the work that you're doing, who will appreciate your mission, and will continue to support you specifically because of that. So that's something that I'd like to see. And if we're talking just on a policy level, also more people who are in the industry and who are thriving, supporting initiatives that will ensure that we have equity day one across the board. It's yet to be seen what will happen with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris as they transition. I know that initially they proposed that cannabis with first 100 days, then they kind of eased it out. So I think it's important that we keep the pressure on them and also our elected officials to make sure that they're going to be ensuring that there is equity day one.
Absolutely. And Maggie, did you want to speak on that as well?
As a founder and CEO, something I think a lot about and now am helping others with is really on how everybody, as Kassia said, at every level and every corner of this industry, I believe it's a privilege to partake in this legal industry as a business owner, as an employee, even as a consumer. And I think it's on every single one of us participating in this market to not only acknowledge the history of the war on drugs and that we still have hundreds of thousands of folks, largely Black and brown men, incarcerated as we profit from the same exact plant. And I think it's critical that each and every one of us are not only sort of educating on the history and screaming about it from the rooftops, but doing what we can to shape this equitable industry now. And so the angle I come from is we are not a for-profit, and I don't pretend to be, but there are things we can do and play our part, which is find the people leading the work, the Cannaclusive and Hood Incubators and Massillons, all these groups that we've been privileged to support. And again, it's not just about money, but amplification, education. Something we've done at Besito is work a lot of this education into our content and amplifying these voices and giving them and paying them a platform and I think, again, it's on all of us. Mm-hmm. There's so much fervor about building this billion-dollar industry and how quickly it's going to grow and regulations changing and money, of course. And I'd like to see the same fervor for the equity side of this industry, especially given the history of this plant.
Maggie, you just touched on something which is going to go into my next question. Can we speak on what social equity is and why it's a necessity for this industry?
I think more so almost than any industry I can think of at the moment, especially given sort of the regulatory change and the shift from a legacy market to regulated state markets and one day federal. This is not a new product. It's just a regulatory inflection point. And our earliest entrepreneurs have been disproportionately affected and incarcerated and still are every day, while we live in this whole alternate universe, at least here in California, where we're creating products and brands in a marketplace. And to me, social equity is building into the policy, but also companies, also ways of working, making sure that folks from these communities that have been most affected and ravaged by the war on drugs are not only participating and benefiting and profiting, but really have ownership that can create intergenerational wealth and support these communities that that need it, and that are integral to the history of this plant and this country.
Absolutely. Kassia, did you want to speak on social equity as well? Screen may be frozen.
Let's see. It's kind of sticky because I mean there's so few states that, I mean, no one's getting it right. Like, if we're going to be honest, the closest we get to anyone being on the right path is like Oakland, you know, Los Angeles, and I say that with like, you know, this much faith, but that's something that I think not just can help drive, but also consumers. I think it's essential that since cannabis has been recognized as an essential drug during this pandemic, that people are in support of social equity. People think that they're going to be losing if they support social equity when it's actually the opposite. You're making sure that everyone wins at every level. So that means that you are advocating for the release of people who are incarcerated for cannabis-related crimes, that people who have already been let out of jails, that they can have their records expunged. That means that communities that have been affected by the war on drugs have those taxes from cannabis sales going directly back into their communities, and not via cops, not via, you know, in New York, at least at one point, Governor Cuomo wanted it to go directly to the MTA, which would then actually go to MTA cops. So not in those manners, but going directly to the people and ensuring that their communities repair every ill that has happened. You can make sure that we're going to stem that. And another big thing is also making sure that while we have legalization, whether it is medical or adult use, that people are not being recriminalized while others are profiting.
Absolutely. For our audience who are watching right now, who are largely business owners and senior leadership throughout the cannabis industry, what advice do you have for companies that want to get started with diversity and inclusion within their company and probably don't know what steps to take? Maggie, do you want to?
Sure, I can jump in. Again,
Like
I'll
Maggie
start
said,
with,
reaching out.
sorry, Kos.
Go ahead, Maggie. Yeah, please.
First and foremost, again, a plug for Cannabis for Black Lives joining us, and the belief, of course, there is that we can have more impact together versus sort of everyone trying to figure out a unique way to support. We are trying to galvanize the industry and sort of harness the sum of our parts. And so plug there. But something else I often tell business owners is it's not one big act, right? It's more so being, I think, extremely thoughtful from the top and really mindful about how you're infusing it in the company. And even if you're not at the top, I think no matter where you are, you can be an advocate for it. And then it's in just every decision. I really believe a decision you make every day as a in this industry, you could be mindful about it, who you're hiring, who you're partnering with on the supply chain, vendors you're choosing. And then, of course, business model is typically an easy one, a percent or a dollar amount from, if you're a products company, from every product sold. If you're a retailer, being mindful about shelf space and who you're allowing to sell, which is the only way we can do it here in California. And there's a lot of power in bringing equity brands in to thrive on your shelf. And so there's no one solution, but I think intention and authenticity and making sure whoever you're working with in or outside your company is values aligned there is how I think it's going to take all these little pieces together. And then, of course, policy, and that's a different story. But pushing for equity from day one over there as well. It's all needed, and I think it's all helpful. And again, it's something we can do each and every day.
Absolutely. Kassia, did you want to chime in on that as well? Guess we're having some.
Yes. I think I'm guessing there's a delay on my end. I'm not sure. Is that what's happening?
A little bit of a delay, but we still have you here.
Okay. So basically all of what he said. Okay. Yes. There are lots of children in my neighborhood, so I gather they're all online and hopefully doing schoolwork, but probably just playing with things that will suck up all of the Wi-Fi, the bandwidth. But basically all of what Maggie said, and in addition to that, find the people who were already doing the work. And not, I mean, it doesn't have to be Cannaclusive, it could be, but again, there's also Supernova Women. There is Nina Parks. There are the folks who are at Mass Eon, the Hood Incubator. There are a fair amount of people within the space who are doing that work. So instead of like necessarily recreating the wheel and creating your own programs, which, you know, of course you're entitled to, seek out their assistance and see how you can partner with them, because then you're also basically adding that representation and you are putting back into those communities.
Now, my next question is probably the flip side to that, what question should a potential employee be asking about diversity and inclusion in regards to a company that he or she may be interested in joining?
I think that they should ask what the board looks like. And that's not a question that is out of bounds. They should also be asking what the management team looks like, so from managerial level up. Obviously, what the turnover is in regards to, you know, how many employees come and go, and what it is that they support, what they do to support the communities that, or other adjacencies that may have had more, that those like communities that had to deal with a lot more, like the war on drugs.
Absolutely. My next question, this Wednesday, we have the inauguration for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. What would you like to see from the incoming presidential administration as it relates to cannabis and diversity and across the nation?
I'll pipe in on the kind of the same note, which is decriminalizing, as wonderful as that sort of sounds off the bat. There are right ways to do it, and I think the biggest insight, back to what Kassia said, is following the leaders who have been doing this work for years. And so in that process, how are we actually helping and bringing the communities that have been most affected into the industry with equity from day one, and not adding regulations and further barriers to keep folks out, but being extremely mindful about how it's done with some of these states and cities that have led this work, so that it's more helpful than harmful.
Okay. Do you both have any sort of like success stories from brand?
Roughly the same.
Oh, sorry, my apologies. Kassia, were you gonna?
No, this lag is really killing me. I'm not going to apologize for it because it's not my fault.
No problem. I was going to ask.
Just wanted to state that I agree with what it is that Meg.
Okay. I was going to ask about success stories. Like, have either of you heard of any sort of success stories over the last few years from brands who were seeking funding, who received funding, who got equity licenses and stuff like that? Mag?
Sure, I'll jump in. We're seeing more and more. It's still beginning, I think, but it's great start. So we have here in California, Supernova Women, Hood Incubator, Ease's Momentum program, a lot of folks helping support individuals getting ownership and participating in this regulated industry. And we need to see so much more. We need to see Black and Brown founders backed so that they are participating from in the market. And obviously, there leaves so much to be desired when it comes to social equity and licensing and policy. And we've seen early success, but I think we need a lot more thought and collaboration, and again, from the experts on how we do this in a truly equitable way as legalization continues nationally.
Maggie, I have a question for you in regards to the importance of mentorships professionally and personally. Like, why is that such a huge necessity right now in our industry?
Great question. This is a tough industry. It's also like 35 different industries. Every market is unique, and it's still federally illegal. It's so highly regulated. And as I mentioned before, in my experience, it's quite bifurcated, the network and the power and the money. And so navigating it is challenging. And for me, I've had amazing mentors, men and women who have helped me build a business. Kassia being one of them, helped me also be an advocate and a better one, an accomplice in this work. And in turn, I love to mentor folks, often women, often folks of color, to share whatever knowledge, access, resources I have to help bring people with me as we build this industry. And something I think especially important for our world is it's still new. Again, in the regulated space, we're still just getting started. It is large and growing, but we're adding tons of jobs every year. And so I tell everybody, whatever skill set you're coming with, especially if there's a passion for the plant and equity in this industry, we need you to join, and you can help be part of and drive this industry, again, in a values-led way, no matter where you're coming from. And so I just raise my hand once more to invite anybody who wants to talk more about that to reach out to me, and we need you to help be part of this.
Absolutely. With the brand Besito being based in Los Angeles, how does the brand tie into the deep Latinx culture that is there, and has it been inspired? Does it draw any inspiration from it?
Yes, absolutely. So besito means little kiss. We sell mini joints accordingly. And the name, which is in Spanish, was inspired not only by my own Cuban heritage and Spanish-speaking background, but of course the Latinx culture of California, and in particular Los Angeles, was really inspired by the impact on culture, the bright colors, the joy, and the connection to cannabis, which we see as creativity, very kind of plant and nature based, very sunny and daytime. Something I felt when I came in 5 years ago was everything was quite dark and hardcore, and that's great, and I celebrate that part of cannabis culture. But I also wanted to portray a different aesthetic and different folks that in my world I know to be using and celebrating cannabis at the beach, on a hike, at a museum, when they were open. And so it was really important to me to show not only in our name and values and products, but also in our creative and who we cast, and because representation matters. And I felt like that sort of point of view was missing. And so again, we hire full-time and part-time, a lot of writers, directors, actors, designers to express their love and experience with cannabis and help show everyone else what a diverse industry this actually is.
All right. And my last question for the both of you is, as we continue to move into 2021, what is that you want to get? What is that you would like to have the cannabis industry get right, especially for this year?
Kassia, want to go first?
I would like if they could get legalization right. I know it's a big feat, but I think that even if one state can get it right, then others will fall in suit. And I also hope that they listen to the advocates and to the people who've been doing the work for the longest time. That's pretty much all that I ask, and I think it's pretty simple.
There you go. Maggie?
Some work that we've been passionate about and have worked closely with our friends at Tree Femme Collective, Equity First Alliance, and National Expungement Week is expungement. And so we have been advocating for widespread automated expungement as legalization continues, so that we make sure folks with a prior record have access to employment, housing, healthcare, as part of helping repair the harms that have been caused while this industry simultaneously grows in profits.
Awesome. And before we go, where can people continue to learn more about you and your brands? Please share it with our audience.
You can definitely.
Oh, go ahead.
I'll go quickly. I think Instagram is a big place where we're besito, Cannaclusive, Cannabis for Black Lives. All of us as individuals are connecting and sharing information and signatures and galvanizing. And then, of course, there are websites for all of those too. But I think Instagram is a great place to start.
Awesome. Kassia, any final parting words from you?
I definitely want to give a shout out to Broccoli. Yes, I definitely want to give a shout out to Broccoli's Floret Coalition. I'm on the board, and we do something similar to Cannabis for Black Lives, except the money that is allotted goes directly to the communities that have been affected. So we've worked with My Sister's House, which creates housing for trans women. Black Feast, which literally like gives people joy via giving them their actual flowers and other like sweet treats. Because one thing is that while we're always like striving for equity and always fighting, we also have to realize that rest is really important. And so that's what Black Feast does, is encourages Black folks to rest. And we've also done some work with the Adabi Healing Shelter, which is a domestic violence shelter in Navajo Nation. So we really span a breadth and try to touch all the communities that have been affected by the war on drugs.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for taking the time out to speak with me today. This has been a great topic and a great start to today's lineup that we have with other panelists. So Kassia Graham of Cannaclusive and Maggie Connors of Besito, thank you both so much. Big round of applause for you, and looking forward to having further conversations in the future as things grow with the accountability list and Cannabis for Black Lives and future projects as well. Thank you both.
Thank you so much for the opportunity and conversation.
No problem. All right, enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll stay tuned to our next panelist.
Thank you.
In a few minutes, which will be on Diversity Matters with Guy Rocourt of Pop and Barkley, Al Harrington of Viola, and Reese Benton of Posh Green Retail.